I've just returned from a trip to see the Northern Lights on a 10-night voyage with Fred Olsen, a cruise line I hadn't stepped foot on in over 10 years. The last time I was on one of their ships was when I was 12-year-old. Let's now fast forward the clock. I'm now 22-year-old and a lot has changed for both me and the cruise line. Is it going to be the same as what it once was? Am I going to feel the same buzz I had as a child? Or is it going to completely reshape everything about how I remember it? I was bringing my girlfriend along on this cruise, who before this point had only ever done 3 cruises with the mainstream cruise lines like P&O and Cunard. Coming into Fred Olsen, I really set a high standard, obviously from how I remember it, and I was really hoping they could maintain it so that she could enjoy it as much as I did as a child. The thing was it going to be like that? Or was it going to be another cruise line that was clearly changed by the pandemic in 2020? We were sailing on Balmoral, Fred Olsen's smallest ship, coming in at just 43,000 tonne. She carries just under 1,300 passengers and is nearly 40-year-old. For her being the smallest ship in the Fred Olsen fleet, a long time ago when I used to cruise with Fred, she was actually the biggest, until in 2020, Fred Olsen done a fleet revise and got rid of the 3 smaller ships, Blackwatch, Boudica and Breathtaking, and replaced them with the ex-Honda Merkel line ships Rotterdam and Amsterdam, renaming them to Borealis and Bullet, and they have now overpassed Balmoral and taken the biggest ship status in the fleet. As departure day neared, we got an email from Fred Olsen stating they delayed our boarding time by about 3 hours. This is due to a norovirus outbreak on the cruise before. They stated this delay would allow time for the crew to clean the ship from bow to stern, minimalising the chance of catching norovirus on the next cruise which we were on. As a kind gesture, Fred Olsen gave everybody on board the ship £25 each in onboard credit. I think this is great value because if you're travelling as a 4, that's £100 per cabin. We were departing my local port in Newcastle. Once we did arrive at the terminal, it was a seamless case of go to the check-in desk, photo taken, documents, security, bus, boat. Nice and easy. Once you did step foot on the ship, you were immediately welcomed by some of the crew, and the cruise director, who by the way was fantastic through the entire cruise. He made a real effort to make sure everyone was having a great time. We were then shown our cabin, which was already prepared for us for when we got on board. None of that sitting around in a lounge, bar or restaurant waiting for an announcement to tell you when you can actually look at your cabin. We booked a superior suite, which as you can clearly see is nothing like some of the newer design modern cabins you'll find on newer cruise ships. But is that really what you're expecting from a nearly 40-year-old ship? Of course not. There's no special window that transforms into a balcony, there's no LEDs that can change depending on what mood you're in, but what it does offer is a cosy atmosphere with that traditional cruising feeling that really seems to be disappearing. Yes, in some areas does need renovation, definitely. In other areas, is it showing its age? Yes. For example, our cabin had no place to put our cases, neither under the beds, in cupboards, nowhere. We searched high and low throughout the cruise to see if we clearly missed an area. There wasn't. So the happy place needed a sofa bed. Does it bother us? No. Will it bother some people? Perhaps yes. It was worth knowing, however, we were staying in a cabin which had 2 single beds. This is because we booked so late. Could you have a different experience in a cabin with a double bed? Yes, you could. There was also no British plug socket anywhere in the cabin, which for an English cruise line we find a little odd. But to be honest, we went to reception and the crew immediately gave us an adapter that would have returned by the end of the cruise. The bathroom, however, was like being transported to a completely different dimension. It clearly came out of a refit, and you'd be forgiven thinking you were on a much newer ship, not one that was pushing 40-year-old. Overall, this space gave us a great cruise. My dad, who was also sailing with us in a separate cabin, had a similar suite to us, and he said he had no problems. He was on the balcony, and I mean every day of this cruise, even in the colder climate of Norway. I think we would all easily stay in a suite of this grade on board Balmoral again. At this point, heading towards departure time, the captain warned us of a storm we would hit tomorrow heading to our first port of Molde. This really worried me. Katie had never been on a ship in a storm, never mind one on a small ship. Was this going to change her thoughts on the cruise? I don't know, and it was really playing on my mind. I was just trying to tell her it won't be bad, it won't be bad. But I really didn't know deep down what it would be like. Surprisingly, we woke up in the North Sea to sunshine and really calm swells. We knew this wouldn't last for long, so we took a stroll around Balmoral's full walk around promenade deck, which modern day ships seem to have less and less of. We took a cruise on P&O Britannia last year, and their promenade deck was a pathetic excuse located on the highest point of the ship, just around the funnel and sports core area. That was the first cruise I'd done in 10 years, and I was so confused. I was glad to be back on Balmoral that had a proper walk around promenade, where you could go straight to the bow and straight to the stern, and do as many laps as you wanted. In the evening, the weather the captain promised had arrived, and I could see Katie was starting to struggle with it. So instead of us going back to the cabin, located on deck 9 forward, where obviously the motion would be a lot more stronger, we decided to go lower down to the midship area, to where the Bookmark Cafe is. The Bookmark Cafe is a really quiet and secluded area right next to the library, selling coffees and chocolates at really reasonable prices. As for restaurants on Fred Olsen, there's no open dining like you'd find on other cruise lines. Instead, each cabin is given a designated restaurant for their evening meal, along with a table number. On our cruise, we were given the Balmoral restaurant, but there's also another 2 on board, the Avon and Spey, along with one specialty restaurant, Colours and Tastes. The food on board didn't disappoint. It was just like how I remember it. Consistently great quality. There was always something we would enjoy. There was also an always available option, in case there was something you didn't like on the original menu. Fred Olsen also do British dish of the day, which range from mashed potatoes to steak and kidney pie, in case you don't fancy something even on the extra menu and you want a taste from home. It's also worth noting that from 2026, Fred Olsen brought in a new service with their Freedom Fare option, giving the passengers free house wines, beers and soft drinks with no limit to how much you can have. And to be honest, our ratings were more than fair with how much they gave us. This, however, is only available in all dining areas. It doesn't cover drinks in bars and other areas of the ship. After battling through the storm all night, we stopped off in Molde, a small town in western Norway. We made sure to get up early so we could make the most of our time ashore, especially with our onboard time being 1:30, just giving us 4 hours and a half to explore. We had a walk along the waterfront, taking the amazing views of the distant mountains and exploring Molde's many landmarks. As we made our way towards Alta, we woke up to a completely different scene outside. Pitch white mountains absolutely surrounding the ship in every direction. There's a lady that said it was as if we sailed straight into a winter postcard. I can't say she's wrong. The views just kept getting better and better as the day went on, and then in the evening we got our first amount of snow hitting the deck of the ship. It really gave that feeling that we were deep in the Arctic. And actually arriving in Alta till 7:30 in the evening. But with an overnight stay, we knew this was going to be a great opportunity to see the Northern Lights, and our Aurora apps were saying the same. And to be honest, it didn't disappoint. During dinner, the app went off, so we ran back to the cabin, opened the balcony door, and there they were. They were dancing right in front of our balcony, and somehow, every time we looked outside, there they were. They were absolutely surrounding the ship for at least a good hour. One of the 2 excursions we did actually book for this cruise took my dad and I to see the Tirpitz Museum. If you weren't aware of the story of the Tirpitz, she was a battleship in service for the German Navy which was berthed here in Alta during World War II. The museum was quite small in size but was absolutely jam-packed full of information and some of the last remaining artefacts from the ship. I even got a hold of a piece of the actual ship's armour belt which was recovered from the wreck site. There was also a picture of a vessel named Black Watch, a Fred Olsen owned ship that was moored next to Tirpitz in Alta during World War II. Not to be confused with the modern day Black Watch which also served with Fred Olsen, which was retired in 2020. After some time at the museum, the bus did actually take us to the site where Tirpitz was berthed, and there was a huge crater in the ground where the bomb had nearly hit her. It was a great experience and I loved the trip. The only downside is I wish I had more time in the Tirpitz Museum, but it was one of my highlights of the cruise, and I'm sure my dad enjoyed it as well. The following day we were in Tromsø, and this was the port I knew Katie had been counting down to the entire trip. Why was this? It was because we were going dog sledding at the Tromsø Wilderness Centre. I knew this was something she'd always dreamt of doing, and it turned out to be the most expensive excursion we'd ever booked, so a lot was riding on how it would actually be delivered. After about a 25-minute coach ride, we'd arrived at the Wilderness Centre, and straight away they got suited up in the full thermals, which, trust me, you do actually need. I can't even count how many times I fell flat on my bum getting from the coach into the centre itself, so do make sure you take them. Not long after, we were quickly ushered over and seated on the sleds, and somehow we were right at the front of the pack we were travelling with, so as we set off we had completely uninterrupted views of the landscape ahead. In total, we were out on the sleds for about 50 minutes, which gave us plenty of time to take in the snowy mountainous landscape around us, and at one of the highest spots along the route we even stopped for a quick photo opportunity with the amazing backdrop behind us. Once we got back, we had some time to just wander around and spend some time with the dogs. This honestly was just as good as being on the sled. Being able to cuddle with the dogs, get up close to them, was just as fun. We did get to see their dogs have their dinner, but honestly, it looked more like something out of the chum bucket than something you'd find in a pedigree dog can. But whatever it was, they definitely did enjoy it. To finish it all off, we were invited into a tent where we were warmed up and invited to have some food of our own. It consisted of a cake and a cup of tea, not as delicious as what the dogs were eating. And after all of that, it's safe to say it completely lived up to the hype, and we have memories that will last a lifetime. We did have a short walk around Tromsø before going back to the ship, but once we did set sail, we hit a storm again, but thankfully it didn't last nowhere near as long as it did on the crossing at the start of the cruise. At our final stop in Olsen, we had a little walk around the town, but before long, it was time to start heading home. And after 10 nights, I couldn't help but ask myself, was Fred Olsen still the same cruise line as I remember from my childhood, or had it completely changed? And more importantly, is it still worth the money today? So, for this 10-night sailing in our superior suite cost us £6,400 for 2 people, which include our food, selected drinks and meal times, plus £150 on-board spend, not counting the extra £50 for the Norway's delay. We then paid £820 for 2 excursions, both with 2 people, bringing our grand total to £7,220. Fred Olsen, in my opinion, have definitely maintained their standards as I remember it, if not even better. From the moment you step foot onto the ship, you get this feeling as if you've just stepped foot into your own home. Now for the crew. I generally don't know where to start. They are some of, or even the best I've encountered at sea, remembering some of the smallest details even you may have forgotten. Whether that's your drink order, or remembering what you said you were doing in port the day before. For example, the head mate of the day remembered me and my dad, and even my mum, who wasn't even sailing with us on this cruise. To remember a surname that after seeing so many people on a day-to-day basis over more than 10 years is nothing short of exceptional. The ship, for 38-year-old, she's in impeccable condition, and you see the crew working on it around the clock to keep it that way. But if you're thinking of going on Balmoral and expecting the glitz and glamour of the modern behemoths, she's not for you. However, if you want traditional cruising with a cosy, homely atmosphere, accompanied once again with some of the most attentive crew at sea, We can't do anything but recommend Balmoral. Yes, in some areas the cabins could do for a little refresh, and some of the artwork can only be described as a bit odd. But Balmoral has a character unlike any of the ships I've sailed on since returning to cruising in 2023. The only exception being Queen Mary 2. We can't wait to sail on Balmoral again, and we hope you love her as much as we do. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed viewing it as much as I did making it. And I'm looking forward to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.